According to sources, Michael Ilisai from the television program 90 Day Fiancé is reportedly suing TLC for $50 million, which has changed the course of the matter. Michael allegedly alleges that during the show's recording and airing, during their appearances on 90 Day Fiancé, his wife Angela engaged in violent behavior against him, and that TLC and the show producers failed to step in or handle it. Angela's behavior toward Michael has often involved verbal abuse, shouting, and domineering activities, which viewers have watched across numerous seasons. The relationship between Michael and Angela has been characterized by considerable disagreements and moments of stress. Many fans have voiced unease and worry about Angela's handling of Michael, accusing TLC of showing what seems to be domestic abuse without taking any action in response to his alleged complaint. Michael is claiming that TLC intentionally broadcast abusive footage. He says the network did not take action to stop Angela's abusive behavior from being shown or to offer him help.
I don't give a goddamn about no money.
Calm down.
You and your goddamn money.
Me no peace.
You bitch.
What me no?
Bitch.
Do you think the show changed Angela?
Well, the show didn't change her. I mean, she wants to be that.
Did you tell my daughters all women are stupid?
So what you expect me to?
Bitch.
You know. So
You
what
better,
is it?
let me tell you something. You better get your ass and get your.
I said
You
my
ass to get
opinion.
back up. Back up. There is a problem here. And you are the problem. Is that why you're sleeping in the different room?
Hell
The
no.
whores here in New Jersey.
Treated badly by her. Whenever she's upset, she can do whatever she wants. And the law here, I don't want any issue. I don't want any bad record of my name. So I tend to, keep it cool. But to be honest, I was scared. Sometimes when she's very upset, she made me feel.
Taking advantage of someone else's suffering if these reports are true, Michael argues that TLC failed to uphold its obligation to ensure the safety and mental health of its participants, favoring entertainment value over the participants' well-being and dignity, especially in his case of failing to protect cast members. A number of significant issues regarding the duty of care owed by reality TV networks and producers are brought up by Michael's case. It is morally and even legally required of reality TV producers to keep their participants safe. According to Michaels, TLC may have disregarded this obligation in an effort to provide dramatic content and increase viewers. Material portrayal of domestic abuse the way domestic abuse is portrayed on television might have detrimental effects. Critics contend that careful handling of this kind of material is necessary to prevent further traumatization of victims and viewers' desensitization to the effects of abuse on participants. Due to their exposure to and exploitation of their personal lives for entertainment, reality TV stars frequently endure severe emotional and psychological stress. This case might establish guidelines on how networks need to handle its users. The most damaging the testimony of Angela's own private investigator was used by Michael's legal team in a desperate attempt to gather evidence against Michael. Angela had hired the investigator in the hopes of catching him red-handed and proving he was the man she believed him to be, but the seasoned professional spent weeks following Michael, interviewing people in his life, and digging into his past. What the investigator discovered was not what Angela had hoped for, as she was confident the investigator would unearth anything that would confirm her suspicions. However, when the private investigator took the stand, the courtroom was left in shock rather than hearing a shocking revelation that implicated Michael.
The private detective to prove that I'm wrong. I want it to be wrong. I want to be so wrong. He has no idea.
Michael, were you aware that Angela hired a private investigator?
He discovered no proof of cheating, scamming, or any other shady behavior. Rather, it was a twist that nobody anticipated, particularly not Angela. As the verdict approached, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. The verdict investigator characterized Michael as an honest and truthful man who had been wrongfully caught up in Angela's vendetta. His testimony was the last straw in Angela's case. When the judge eventually ruled that Michael was innocent of all charges, the courtroom erupted in applause. Angela was clearly shaken, fidgeting in her seat, her face twisted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She couldn't get her mind around the fact that the man she had spent years with, the man she was convinced had betrayed her, might actually be innocent. As the applause erupted, Angela leapt up and began yelling at the judge, Michael, the private investigator, and anybody else who would listen. Her outburst was a mixture of rage and disbelief, and she wasn't done making her voice heard. Michael had won. He was free from Angela's accusations, and his name had been cleared. Angela claimed the investigator had been bought off by Michael's legal team, accusing him of lying. This time, however, nobody was noticing her outburst since the courtroom had already moved its attention to cheering Michael on his significant victory. Her outburst was the kind of volcanic wrath that had become her trademark on *90-day Fiancé. Angela's screams echoed through the room, but Michael remained calm. He had seen her side before, but it no longer controlled him. Angela was no longer free, both legally and emotionally. Her attempts to bring him down had failed, and now it was time for him to move on with his life. Angela stormed out of the courtroom, still hurling accusations and insults. With the support of his friends and family, Michael was ready to start anew and felt a flood of peace wash over him. He had battled hard to reach this point, and now it was finally here. Michael was aware that he could move past the past and look forward to a better future, but even as he did, Angela's rage remained simmering. She wasn't one to back down easily, and her battle wasn't over yet. In the days that followed, Angela continued the drama by appearing on talk shows, giving interviews, and taking to social media to express her frustration with the verdict. However, the more she vented, the more obvious it became to everyone that she was just a bitter, angry woman who was finding it difficult to accept her loss. However, Michael welcomed his newfound freedom and threw himself into tasks that he had been putting off for years. Reconnected with old friends and even began considering new relationships. The trial had been a pivotal moment in his life, a moment when he realized he owed no one, especially not Angela, any proof of his value. He had been vindicated, and now, as the months passed, the aftermath was prepared to concentrate on his own happiness and future. As Michael flourished and was finally able to live his life on his own terms without Angela's shadow hanging over him, fury gradually faded into the background. The public grew tired of her constant outbursts, and even her most ardent supporters started to question her motives. Angela was left to face the consequences of her actions and the fallout they had caused. She had attempted to tear Michael apart, but ultimately had only succeeded in tearing herself down. Her reputation was damaged, her credibility called into question, and she was left to cry out into the emptiness while Michael moved on to a life full of hope and promise for years. From the moment he met Angela, Michael Ellis was enthralled with her fiery personality and bold confidence, believing these qualities concealed a heart that would truly value the love and loyalty he was ready to give. However, as time went on, Michael began to realize that his devotion to Angela was being taken for granted, and that his love was being used against him in ways he could never have predicted. Michael Ellis had been stuck in a relationship that was more about endurance than love. Whether it was through sincere words, small tokens of affection, or going above and beyond to make accommodations, Michael's efforts to show Angela his love were unwavering and unrelenting. He would get up early to call her, fully aware of how much she valued their daily check-ins, even if it meant giving up his own sleep. He would go out of his way to avoid any situation that could be interpreted incorrectly, reassuring Angela that she was the only woman in his life rather than accepting Michael's affection with warmth. Angela hardly, if ever, returned his efforts to let her know he was thinking of her, missing her, and making plans for their future together. If Michael called too frequently, Angela would frequently react with distrust and rage, making it seem as though nothing he did was ever sufficient. Angela called him clingy and accused him of cheating if he didn't make enough calls. Even when he tried to surprise her by making meaningful gestures, Angela would turn them into something negative and say he was trying to control her. One of Angela's closest friends once said brutally honest things about how Angela treated Michael, and it hit Michael hard because it was painfully true that he was often treated as though his feelings didn't matter, as though he existed solely to fulfill Angela's needs and desires. Michael found himself trapped in a lose-lose situation where his love was both rejected and demanded in equal measure. From what Angela's friends saw, Michael's role in the relationship was to be silent and obedient, always ready to jump at her command but never allowed to voice his own thoughts or feelings. She would bark orders at him, expecting him to obey immediately, and she rarely, if ever, listened to what he had to say. Their disagreements, which had become more regular and intense over time, cruelly demonstrated this dynamic, as every time Michael attempted to voice his opinion or express his thoughts, Angela would cut him off. Mid-sentence, stop talking. Michael, she would cry, her voice exploding with annoyance and contempt. Whether the disagreement was over something minor or significant, Michael was never allowed to finish his ideas. His thoughts and voice were constantly ignored, as though they had no worth. Angela used silencing as a control mechanism, not merely to win disputes, but also to ensure that the story of their relationship remained biased in favor of her. Over time, this caused Michael's spirit to deteriorate. He became quieter and more reserved, fearing that anything he said would trigger another outburst from Angela. The man who had once been full of life and energy was now subdued, his light dimmed by the relentless negativity from the woman he loved. Despite all of this, Michael remained committed to Angela, believing that if he just tried harder, he would love her more and prove his loyalty. No matter what he did, Angela couldn't or wouldn't see it because she was too consumed by her fears and insecurities to recognize the genuine love Michael was offering her as the culmination of this toxic relationship. He sincerely wanted Angela to understand that his love was genuine and that he wasn't like the men who had hurt her in the past. The court case involving Angela's allegations against Michael of cheating, scamming, and manipulating her was quite dramatic. As the charges mounted, Michael began to feel the burden of all the years he had spent trying to convince someone he loved her in a courtroom full of witnesses and lawyers. This trial was the ultimate showdown of Michael's love, but for the first time, he wasn't just trying to prove himself to Angela. He was fighting to show the world his truth when Angela's private investigator came clean and declared Michael innocent of all charges. Michael couldn't help but think about all the times he'd been silenced, all those moments when Angela chose doubt over trust. His relief was immense and lasted for years. In the most public manner conceivable, Michael's efforts to convince Angela that he was a stand-up guy, that his love was genuine, and that he earned her confidence have finally been rewarded. Michael was a man who had been wronged and suppressed, but was eventually allowed a voice. He wasn't the evil Angela had painted him as. Angela's reaction to the verdict was exactly what everyone expected. She lashed out enraged that the world wasn't siding with her, but Michael didn't give a damn about her tantrums. For the first time in years, he felt liberated from the grip of Angela's control. He had triumphed not just in court, but in life. He'd proven his innocence's worth, and that he wouldn't be silenced anymore as Michael strode out of the courtroom with his head held high. He knew this was the start of a fresh chapter. He was done bending over backward to prove his love to someone who refused to see it. From now on, Michael would focus on loving himself, finding someone who appreciated him for who he truly was, and living a life free from the toxic mess that had defined his relationship with Angela. The road ahead wouldn't be a walk in the park. He knew healing from years of emotional abuse would take time, but Michael was ready to take those first steps toward a brighter future. He was ready to speak up, share his story, and show the world he was more than just the man silenced by Angela Deem. He was Michael Alexander, a man who had fought for his freedom and emerged victorious. As he looked to the future, he saw it glowing with possibilities he once thought were in the end. Michael's triumph wasn't just about winning the court cases. It was about taking back his life, his dignity, and his future. As he looked toward the future, he knew that no matter what challenges came his way, he was strong enough to tackle them head-on. He had weathered the storm and was now free to finally bask in the sunshine. Thank you for watching. Beyond his grasp, he was no longer the quiet, compliant man letting Angela dictate his life. He was now a man who had reclaimed his voice, his dignity, and his future, and that above all else was the greatest victory of all.